Let's talk about how we got here, Madam Speaker. The road to the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service. You know, it started back with Bill 11 in March 2024, when the minister claimed at that time he was doing this because RCMP wasn't able to provide enough officers. He said, that's a challenge, the minister said. I get that, but I can't wait. March 2024, the minister said the problem was so significant he could not wait. Now, municipal leaders at the time, they expressed their disinterest in his plan, their opposition to his plan. Alberta sheriffs noted that they had not been consulted by the minister about his plan. September 26, 2025, nonetheless, the Premier shows up at Alberta municipalities, and contrary to the minister saying this is just to supplement the RCMP, she told Alberta municipalities Alberta now has 2 provincial police services. September 2025, Madam Chair, now has. It didn't exist yet. But the Premier claimed that was her intention, that's what they're going to do, said municipalities are going to have the opportunity to choose an independent sheriff's detachment. May 2025, Bill 49. Article from the media that said the Alberta government wants to create a new provincial police service using about half of the sheriff workforce to offer municipalities an alternative to the RCMP. So again, moving forward from where the minister was just a year before, where he said he was supplementing the RCMP. Now he wants to give an alternative to the RCMP. Now we find ourselves back here this year where he's claiming he's supplementing the RCMP. At that time, he said there'll be one more option for municipalities to determine the best approach to law enforcement. That's the first time he started talking about having 600 sheriffs performing police-like duties that he could train and deploy as officers. At that time, the president of the Alberta municipalities said that municipal leaders were frustrated, yes, by rising costs without seeing improvement in the community, but he said, quote, I don't know of any municipalities that are asking for an alternative to the RCMP. He had many questions about the cost of a provincial service, worried it would divide the skilled workers between multiple agencies. And the minister's office did not have any answers to questions about whether the government plans to replace any of the sheriffs who he intends to transition to police. And we did get that answer this year in estimates, Madam Speaker. He does not. July 2nd, 2025, we had the announcement of the new name, the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service, and the new chief, Mr. Sat Parhar. And now we have Bill 15. So we have a 2-year journey to get here, Madam Speaker. And the minister back in 2024 said he could not wait because the problem was so significant for folks in rural Alberta, to ensure that they would have those boots on the ground when they call, when they need them. As of 2 years later, Madam Speaker, not a single pair of new boots on the ground. Not one from that minister. And what we know now through Bill 15 and through the budget this year, which is the first time the minister has put any numbers on the record in 2 years, the first time we've had any glimpse of what the cost of this is going to be, how much he intends to spend, what he intends to accomplish. And you know what his budget and business plan says? You know what it says on Schedule 22 in the fiscal plan, Madam Speaker? I apologize. It says the minister will add 30 new officers in the next year. 30. There's well over 100 RCMP detachments across this province, Madam Speaker. Now, of those, there's maybe 20 to 30 that are in mid-sized cities. So that leaves about 80 to 90 out there. The minister is offering 30 officers, Madam Speaker, 30. That's what, half an officer, quarter of an officer for each area? The minister said 2 years ago he could not wait. And he is offering next to nothing. Now, of course, the minister talks about transitioning these 600 officers that are, these 600 sheriffs that are already doing police-like functions. So again, at estimates, we discussed that. He plans to transition 200 per year over the next 3 years. But the fact is, Madam Speaker, That is not any net new boots on the ground. Those are the same officers already fulfilling police-like functions. They will get a small increase in their efficiency because they no longer have to depend on an RCMP officer or other officer of jurisdiction to complete an arrest. But that is not a single new officer amongst that 600 that he will transition within 3 years that will add to anyone who can answer a call when it comes in. Not one. Meanwhile, what I can tell you, Madam Speaker, is that the RCMP did just graduate a class of 22 new recruits, all of whom are already beginning service in Alberta. New boots on the ground. In addition, they have another 6 experienced police officers who are currently in training that will deploy here in a few weeks. So we are seeing some results there. I mean, the minister has remained pretty critical of vacancies in the RCMP, despite the fact that he has vacancies himself within the Alberta Sheriffs. They can't cover, he admitted. During estimates, he said clearly, they are not keeping up with prisoner transfers. They don't have enough officers. And you know what happens when we don't have enough sheriffs to do the prisoner transfers, Madam Speaker? It means that RCMP officers have to go and do those prisoner transfers. So the minister says, we don't have enough RCMP officers, therefore I need to send sheriffs to fulfill police-like functions. The sheriffs are fulfilling those police-like functions and don't show up to do the prisoner transfer, which means we have to pull more RCMP officers to do that prisoner transfer. So the minister's plan has been to take more actual full-fledged officers away from taking calls so that he can grandstand about sending sheriffs to answer police calls. That is not a plan that respects Albertans. That is not a plan that respects either the sheriffs or the officers, Madam Speaker. So, you know, I was out at the rural municipalities of Alberta. I was at the Alberta Municipalities Caucus. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, this minister has no credibility with his plan. Nobody is buying what he is selling. And a performance like this today, profoundly unserious performance from the minister on something on which he is spending tens of millions of dollars, and on which he has refused to consult with the sheriffs, with the folks that are apparently supposed to be buying his service from the with the Albertans he's claiming he's doing this to serve. And he stands here and makes up stories about the Calgary Police Service. He stands here and makes accusations that are, as I have laid out, were quite contrary to the facts. Spends more time attacking the opposition than speaking to his plan. Perhaps he's auditioning, Madam Speaker, to be back on this side of the aisle in a year or so. The fact is, Madam Speaker, when we are talking with municipal leaders, their concern is this minister's police funding model. They are concerned with their rising policing costs in their communities. And this is a universal truth. Even in the cities that have their own police services, Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, we are seeing rising policing costs. And you know what they're calling for, Madam Speaker? They're calling for more investment in other areas that will help reduce policing costs. So I just spoke with some members of the RCMP today, and they agreed. They said if this government would step up and make proper investments in the court system. I will give the Minister of Justice some credit. He has been appointing a few more judges lately. Let's hope that continues. Let's hope they don't follow through with their threat to start defunding the courts because they want to stomp their feet at Ottawa. But we need more of that. We need more staff in those courts so we don't have situations like we had in Calgary just a couple years ago where judges had to call this government out because they were having to combine courtrooms because there was not enough judges or staff. A properly functioning justice system, that will reduce the cost of policing, Madam Speaker. It will mean when we have those boots on the ground, when they make an arrest, that arrest can stick. That the Crown prosecution have the time and the capacity to push all of those things through and don't have to think about what's lower level cases because this government is not properly funding the system. And you know what, Madam Speaker? They are also calling for more investments in social services. The minister can stand here and make whatever claims he wants about what we mean when we say what. But what we are doing is actually reflecting the voice of Albertans, the folks he does not want to listen to. They are calling for increases in FCSS because they know when they have more funding for their local programs for prevention and support, that takes burden off of the local police. Because we're not talking, Madam Speaker, about social workers having to go to serious crimes. What we are talking about is helping prevent things like domestic violence, petty theft, drug use. All of these things that happen when people lack proper social supports, when we don't invest in prevention programs. Then these things grow out of control and they take up the capacity of police, and that is what keeps police from being able to respond to more serious crimes or makes it more difficult. That takes boots away from where they need to be. The minister would rather stand here and make cheap political attacks than actually recognize that public safety is an ecosystem. And yes, our police and our first responders are at the front of that. They are the tip of the sword. And they are an essential part of this. And I will continue to say and maintain this is the only government that has ever defunded those police. As I just read, the facts, the article, the quote from the Chief of Calgary Police himself. But there are many, many things we can do to improve the situation. One of them is not the creation of this minister's new provincial police service, which in over 2 years has done nothing to put any more boots on the ground, who in the next year will barely move the dial in putting any boots on the ground, despite spending $29 million more. Minister who refuses to even just simply go and see the real-time operations center, where he's refusing to appoint an Alberta sheriff to collaborate with the RCMP. That is not a minister, Madam Speaker, who is willing to do everything he can to actually put boots on the ground, to actually protect Albertans and provide better safety. Those are the actions of a minister more interested in politics than public safety. The fact is, what we have in Bill 15 is not going to make any significant difference for any community in this province anytime soon. And the minister kind of wants to have it both ways. He wants to stand here and tell us all about how crime is actually going down, but at the same time, it's absolutely desperate we have more boots on the ground to respond to crime. What I will say, Madam Speaker, is that yes, we need to respond to the needs of Albertans. And we need to do that collaboratively, actually listen to and work with our municipal leaders. Talk with them about their concerns about this new police funding model in which the minister is drastically raising the policing costs for every municipality in this province, some by as much as 300%. And then stands here in this House and mocks their suggestions on how we can help bring those costs down. We need a government, we need a minister who is actually willing to work with all of the partners, who actually works with the RCMP instead of just talking about it, who actually treats them with respect, who actually sits down at the table with the federal government to negotiate a better deal. They are there and they are sitting and they are waiting And this minister has instead spent 2 years putting together a multi-million-dollar system that will deliver only 30 boots on the ground 2 years later. Albertans deserve far, far better, Madam Speaker. And I will stand by my record of support for the police here in Edmonton, the multiple graduations I attended on behalf of the Minister of Justice during our time in government, the times I've gone out on patrol with the members, the meetings I continue to have with our local chief, with members of the RCMP, with folks doing this work on the ground across the province, with municipal leaders, actually listening to them about their concerns and actually bringing their voices here, instead of standing in here and talking and refusing to take their calls and emails. Albertans deserve transparency. They deserve real support. They deserve a government that puts their needs ahead of its political interests. They don't have it now. But I'll tell you, Madam Speaker, we are ready and we are waiting. Thank you.
The Honourable Member.